Hey folks, Matt here. I am sitting at my kitchen counter at the moment, drinking a glass of orange juice and freshly filtered water using a filter that I bought at Bed Bath & Beyond this morning. I've decided to step outside of my comfort zone and the quote-unquote box within the podcast realm and put together a different kind of episode. I'm not sitting with my technical audio team. I'm not sitting and asking someone else questions. I'm literally sitting here by myself drinking a glass of orange juice and freshly filtered water. And the idea here is that following rules or guidelines or the way that it's supposed to be is not the real nature of the vacation rental industry. And for that reason, doing the exact same kind of podcast week after week gets boring and is not a true testament to the spirit of our industry. And so I wanted to try something new. And I am indeed looking for feedback here. If this is interesting to listen to, please let me know. If this is not interesting to listen to, please throw an egg directly at my window. And if you like it, we'll do more of them. And if you don't like them, well, I'll decide if we do more of them or not. The main idea, I'd like to talk about one specific thing in each episode and just some uncensored thoughts that I've been contemplating. There are certainly not going to be any rules to this podcast model or format. There's bound to be some kinds of interruptions. My mother almost always calls me in the middle of something that I'm trying to record. So if you hear the phone, that's probably her. There may be a knock at the door. Anything could happen, really. So that should make things exciting, at least more thrilling than sitting down and interviewing someone. There also won't be any kind of length specifications. I may speak for 5 minutes. I may decide to speak for 50. Hopefully I won't decide to speak for 50. But each discussion with myself is going to address one subject in the industry that seems to be worth listening to, or at least worth thinking about. And this week, I've been thinking a lot about an article that I read on Amy Hinote's blog, VRM Intel. I don't know if she calls it a blog. That's probably not the right word. It's more like an industry news site. Amy forever has been the hub of all of that newsy information, and she's made a great name for herself in our space for that, for being trustworthy conveyor of news. And Amy published an article on June 3rd, which is officially a little more than a week and a half ago. I'm sitting here on my brand new MacBook, which is still slightly overwhelming to figure out all of these buttons, but I can figure out the date. She wrote an article on her blog that addresses a company called Greater Sum Ventures. The acronym for that company is GSV. And the title of this post, which of course I'll link to below, is GSV Initiates Technology Rollup in the Vacation Rental Industry, including Liverez, Streamline, VRMB, Bluetent, and more. Now, if you had never heard the word roll-up like me before this article, well, in a business sense, of course, we know fruit roll-ups. This is a technology roll-up, which I'm just envisioning being kind of like a little technological fruit roll-up in which a bunch of different softwares are rolled up into one. And Amy basically breaks this story, which I think she's probably been working on like a true investigative journalist for quite some time. But she finally decided to come out and say it, at least what she knew. And you can tell she's very diplomatic with her words. She's picked each of her phrases very carefully, I can tell. But the gist of the story is that a company called Greater Sum Ventures, partnering with a company called Insight Venture Partners. Both of them sound very fancy, if you ask me. If you want to sound fancy, just put the word venture in your name and people will think of you more highly, just FYI. Has been steadily rolling up large technology companies in the vacation rental industry, acquiring majority stakes in Streamline, BizCore, Bluetent, which purchased visual data systems, Rental Guardian, Virtual Resort Manager, and most recently Liverez. And the number is growing as more companies are currently in the due diligence process. I'm going to just continue reading because this one other paragraph sets the stage nicely. She says, reportedly, purchase agreements for these companies include a mix of cash, shares for founders in the overall roll-up. Now I can't read the word roll-up without thinking fruit roll-up. And earn consideration based on performance. Each company's deal is different, with some founders receiving a more optimal mix of compensation levers than others. The structure of the purchase allows each company to claim that GSV has invested, quote unquote, in the company rather than labeling the commercial arrangement as an acquisition. And tight non-disclosure agreements prevent these founders from discussing the purchase arrangements. I'm almost immediately transported into some sort of strange film scene in which some evil genius is trying to take over the world. That's the way the way my mind works. But Amy kind of goes on to talk about what she believes are the future plans for this roll-up, this fruit roll-up. She says GSV has repeatedly declined to comment. She expresses some of the concerns that she, on behalf of the owners and the managers, have about a roll-up like this. And I think, in short, her very salient and honest argument is that in an industry that's evolving rapidly, innovation and the kinds of technological solutions need to be revolving at an equally fast clip. And I think what Amy is ultimately suggesting is that if one company, if one group of stakeholders, if one venture is in charge of all of that, all of a sudden the whole thing becomes riskier. The future becomes way more unpredictable for the vast majority of us. When these companies were fragmented or on their own, at least you had CEOs and groups of stakeholders at each of these companies that had their own interests, and almost inherently to a diverse group like that, you get some sort of sustainability, optionality, as I like to say, about your business as an independent owner or manager. But when one person is controlling all of them, that one person gets to make the call. And without that one person, whoever it is, speaking and thinking on behalf of the greater industry, everybody is at risk. I think this is a really scary concept, and it makes perfect sense to me. In fact, this company, Greater Sum Ventures, even reached out to Amy, and Amy copy and pasted in the true transparent sense that she sticks to. She published the email that she received from a senior associate at Greater Sum Ventures and sort of walks us as the reader through the typical pattern, the sequence of events that these individuals are making in acquiring all these companies. I don't really know exactly what to think of this. And I think the initial and fair reaction should be fear, knowing that someone is trying to acquire everything, and probably, and I think this is arguably the biggest flaw of the whole story, going to sell it to somebody else. that is a little bit terrifying, because that individual who's in charge of putting together that sale is likely going to position everything in the favor of his sale as opposed to in the favor of all of these fragmented independent stakeholders. So the initial reaction of fear assumes that this person running this venture fund or venture greater sum ventures doesn't have the best interest of all of the independent owners and managers at heart. And there is a chance that maybe this person does. And this person is interested in a long-term kind of success for everybody involved. But you can see where the concern would be for an individual like that, who I personally had never heard of, who a lot of people probably had never heard of. And I think if you have been in the industry for more than a year, you know that our industry is heavy on relationships, of forming meaningful connections with our guests, with our fellow owners and managers, quote unquote, competitors, with our technology providers and our vendors. And when we really think about it, our whole industry is based on these kinds of meaningful understandings and empathy. So who knows what's going to happen there? But I did think it was something relevant for folks to know about. And it's almost certainly going to affect, or should make more stressed, folks who use these softwares who are at a size that these softwares are targeting. So if you have one property, chances are you were not using one of these companies. And if you only have a few properties, chances are your business isn't do or die by any one of these specific technological solutions. If you are in that pool of individuals who will be affected, the argument, or at least the official response, has been that none of these softwares will be changing anytime soon. In fact, there is a comment from my friend Carlos Corzo over at Streamline, right below Amy's piece, and I can see it was made at 2 a.m. On June 4th, the day after Amy published it. So chances are Carlos had some very important ideas to share. And indeed, Carlos argues that at Streamline, we're actually pouring more money and resources into improving our technology than we ever have before. There are much more technological surprises to come. So maybe this is a good thing for companies like Streamline and the members that are using them. That would certainly be a great outcome. Someone named TL also comments, and by the way, I love reading comments. Oftentimes I find that comments of any article tell you more about life than the article itself. I specifically love reading comments on New York Times articles, just because the people who comment on them oftentimes have really poignant words to share. They phrase things really nicely. Of course, then there's the occasional crazy person, but those are everywhere these days. Anyway, TL says, synergy. I hope everyone working for these companies can find new jobs before they get synergized. So I think that's a bit of sarcasm there, reminding folks that one word, synergy, can be defined many different ways depending on what you are looking to achieve in our industry. That's it for the moment on that story. And my guess is that Amy will be keeping everybody updated on next steps or updates. I am going to sort of conclude today's conversation with myself at my kitchen counter, drinking a glass of fresh orange juice and fresh, purified water at that. And I would like to ask that if you enjoyed this format of picking one specific important subject that happens to be floating around our industry at any given moment, not necessarily weekly, could be every day. Just kidding, I would never do that to you. Maybe every couple weeks, maybe every month, who knows. Choosing an important subject, sitting down with a microphone, going through what we do know, and potentially opining on what might happen next. Let me know what you think. Send me an email. I would actually really appreciate it if you write a review for the podcast. This is something like, if you think that getting reviews for your vacation rental is hard, getting reviews for a podcast is virtually impossible. That's a fact. However, vacation rental professionals, the kind that listen to these sorts of things, are able to make magic. So I would love if you took a minute or two, sit down at your computer, whether it's your iTunes app or your Apple Podcasts. I actually don't even really know exactly any of the platforms, all of the platforms that these are hosted on, nor exactly how all of the reviews work exactly. I'm just now realizing that I was not in the position to make a specific call to action. But chances are you do. You do know how to write a review. And when we get reviews for the podcast, that bumps us up in the rankings. And it gets more and more people listening to our material. It also gives us moral support to continue down this path. Email me, Matt@VRMB, or if you have not ever signed up for our groundbreaking newsletter, sign up at VRMB.com. People who sign up at VRMB.com typically receive good tips over the course of a few months and eventually become an esteemed Inner Circle member. That is our private, paid community of over 800 independent owners and managers who discuss things like this and how to be the most professional person in town on a regular basis, online in a virtual format. I'm going to provide both those links below. I would love to have you in the community. And if you're just the sort of individual who would prefer to casually listen to podcasts like this, me sitting at my countertop, rambling, that's totally cool too. I look forward to meeting you one day, and I hope you have a great week.